The vineyard estate glowed under soft amber lights, the scent of lavender drifting in from the surrounding fields. Vincent Leclerc stood at the head of a long oak table, raising a crystal glass of white wine, his face lit with the ease of a man who thought he'd won. His fiancée, Cassandra Wynne, sat beside him, all diamonds and practiced laughter, unaware of the silent war simmering beneath her fiancé's calm demeanor. Vincent's hand brushed hers as he spoke. "To new beginnings," he said. The guests echoed the toast, but even as he smiled, his eyes flicked toward the stack of RSVP cards in his back pocket. One, in particular, without a return address. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. Ilara. He'd sent it on purpose, of course. A single envelope delivered by hand to the last known address he could find through a private investigator. A rundown apartment above a laundromat in another state. He imagined her opening it in some dim-lit room, seeing the gold-embossed invitation and realizing exactly what it meant. He was finally marrying up, not down. "You seriously invited your ex?" His groomsman Peter had said 2 weeks ago, shaking his head. "You think she'll actually show up to watch you get married?" "I hope she does," Vincent had replied, his tone oddly light. It would be good for her. Closure. But the truth was more acidic than he let on. Ilara had once left him with nothing but a note, her name scrawled at the bottom like an afterthought. She'd walked away when his empire was still a dream scribbled on legal pads. She hadn't believed in his vision, not really, not enough, and now? He wanted her to see exactly what she had thrown away. As the final guest left the rehearsal dinner, Vincent lingered in the shadows of the pergola. His phone buzzed with a text. She got it. It was from the investigator. Vincent read it again, heart pounding with a thrill he hadn't felt in years. He could already picture it. Ilara in some outdated thrift store dress, standing awkwardly among the silk-gowned crowd, the servers ignoring her, the whispers thick and cruel. Cassandra radiant in white, walking toward him under a rain of flower petals, Ilara watching alone. He grinned. Back inside, Cassandra slipped her arm around his waist. "You're quiet tonight." "Just thinking," he said. "About tomorrow. You think your ex will come?" she asked, half laughing. Vincent kissed her cheek. "I doubt it." He said it smoothly, but deep down he hoped she would. No, he needed her to. There was a satisfaction waiting on the other side of her discomfort, a punishment for walking away. Later, alone in his study, Vincent pulled out an old photograph from his desk drawer. Ilara, sitting barefoot in their first apartment, painting the wall a terrible shade of yellow. He stared at her smile, not for the nostalgia, but for what came next. He tore it clean in two and dropped it into the fireplace. The flames flickered to life. Outside, across the state line, a black limousine rolled to a quiet stop in front of a tailor's boutique. The driver stepped out and opened the door. A woman emerged, silhouetted in moonlight, and 3 children followed. The ceremony had just begun. The sun hung perfectly above the vineyard estate, casting soft golden hues across the rows of white chairs. Waiters in ivory uniforms floated like ghosts with trays of champagne. A string quartet played something classical, expensive. Guests murmured under parasols, the kind of crowd that knew how to whisper wealth. Vincent stood near the altar, flawless in his tailored black tuxedo, drink in hand, smile effortless. He glanced at his watch. Everything, the imported orchids, the French linens, the wine label with his and Cassandra's initials, was running exactly on time. As planned. A light hush fell over the crowd as Cassandra began her walk down the stone aisle, her veil trailing like fog behind her. The music swelled. Phones discreetly lifted, then the low hum of an engine broke through. At first, no one turned. It wasn't part of the program. The hum grew louder. The string quartet faltered. A head turned. Then another. All eyes drifted from the aisle to the gravel driveway just beyond the vineyard gates. A black limousine rolled in, sleek, silent, with tinted windows. The kind of car reserved for diplomats or funerals. Vincent's hand tightened around his champagne flute. The limo slowed to a stop at the edge of the ceremony. The engine went quiet. A moment passed. Stillness hanging in the air like glass. Then the driver stepped out. He walked to the rear passenger door, adjusted his cuffs, and pulled it open. From the shadows of the car emerged a woman. Her heels touched the gravel like punctuation. She wore a deep navy dress. Not black, not red, but something that whispered confidence with every fold. Her hair was pulled back in a low, polished bun, her earrings subtle but unmistakably real. Her posture was calm, unshaken. She didn't scan the crowd. She already knew who'd be looking, Alara. For a breath, no one moved. No one spoke. Then, a collective murmur. Behind her, 3 children followed. 2 boys, 1 girl, all dressed in tailored outfits that matched her gown. Dark navy tuxedos for the boys and a silk dress for the girl with a satin bow around her waist. They were about 6, maybe 7, identical, almost unnerving in their symmetry. Triplets. Vincent's glass slipped slightly in his hand, catching against his ring. A single drop of champagne spilled onto his cuff. Cassandra, halfway down the aisle, stopped walking. Alara and the children walked slowly toward the chairs, as if they had every right to be there. Not defiant, composed. The guests turned in waves, mouths parting but no words forming. Phones came out again, but more discreetly this time. Vincent didn't blink, he couldn't. Alara never looked at him. She didn't need to. She simply placed her hand on the girl's shoulder and led the children to the back row. The driver remained beside them, arms folded, watching. Cassandra reached the altar, but her smile had cracked. Her eyes darted from Vincent to the woman in blue. Vincent cleared his throat. "You look," he started to say, but the officiant had already begun speaking. "We are gathered here today." The words barely landed. Alara sat down slowly, crossing one leg over the other. The little girl leaned against her. One of the boys stared directly at Vincent. Vincent tried to focus, but the ceremony became background noise. He could feel it. Every whisper, every glance, every question. Why now? Why here? He inhaled sharply, fixing his gaze on the officiant. But deep in his chest, something shifted, something cracked, and behind him, someone quietly reached for their phone. The motel room smelled like mildew and burnt coffee. The kind of place you pay for by the night and leave before the sun gets too high. A buzzing neon sign outside the window blinked vacancy in broken rhythm, casting red light across the torn floral curtains. Alara sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded over her stomach, trying to steady her breathing. 6 weeks pregnant. She hadn't told him yet. Not here, not tonight. Vincent had been pacing for 20 minutes, rehearsing arguments in fragments. "I can't keep doing this," he snapped. "You don't get it, Alara. You never did." She flinched but said nothing. "I'm trying to build something. I'm pitching to investors tomorrow and you show up crying about rent?" Her voice was soft. "I wasn't crying about rent. I was asking for us to figure it out, together." "Together?" He scoffed, throwing his blazer over the chair. "You still wait tables. You think that's a plan? I can't drag you with me, Alara. Not anymore." "I'm not dragging you," she whispered. But it didn't matter. He was on a roll now, pacing faster, talking louder. "All I see is dead weight. You want family dinners and some modest little house. That's not who I am anymore. I've moved past that. Past you." Her fingers curled against the fabric of her skirt. She wanted to scream the truth. That their future was literally growing inside her. But her mouth wouldn't open. "You know what I remember most?" he continued. "That night in the kitchen when I told you my dream. You laughed. Said I should be realistic." "I didn't laugh," she said, finally meeting his eyes. "I was scared." "Exactly," he said. "Your fear. You represent fear. And I can't build an empire with fear by my side." She stood, legs trembling. "Vincent, But he grabbed his keys off the table. Don't start with the guilt." "We're done." She moved toward him. "Please, just let me." He was already at the door. "You should check out in the morning," he said coldly. "I've paid through tonight." The door slammed. The silence that followed was instant and cruel. She stood there for a few seconds, just breathing. Then it hit her, sharp and low, like a rope twisting inside her abdomen. Her knees buckled. She stumbled toward the bathroom, one hand on the wall, the other clutching her stomach. The tiles were freezing. She collapsed near the toilet, her back to the cold porcelain. Pain shot through her spine. Her vision blurred, then something warm, wet. She looked down. Blood, a dark smear across her thigh. "No, no, no," she whispered, trying to sit up straighter, trying to breathe evenly. Her phone was in the other room. Her body wouldn't move fast enough. She curled forward, whispering to the baby that might never be born. "I didn't get to tell him," she said, voice cracking. And she cried, not loud, not hysterical, just the soft, steady kind of crying that belongs to someone completely alone. Hours passed. At some point, she passed out. When she woke, the bleeding had slowed. Her face was pale in the bathroom mirror, her lips cracked, eyes swollen. She pulled herself up, cleaned the blood as best she could, and lay back down on the motel bed in the same clothes. She didn't call Vincent. She didn't tell anyone. In the morning she left. She didn't go to a hospital. She didn't go home. She got on a bus headed west, one hand over her stomach the entire time. Every bump on the road made her wince. But she didn't let go, and as the city vanished behind her, she stared out the window and whispered, "Just hold on a little longer." Back at the vineyard, one of the children turned toward Vincent and smiled. Vincent's smile didn't falter, not fully, but it stiffened at the edges like a mask drying too fast. As the officiant continued the ceremony, his peripheral vision burned with the image of Alara and those 3 children sitting just rows away. They didn't fidget. They didn't giggle. They sat with a stillness that didn't match their age. The little girl had her hands folded neatly in her lap. One of the boys had his head slightly tilted, watching Vincent with a quiet intensity. The other stared off at the vineyard horizon like he'd seen it all before. Vincent blinked, forced his gaze back to Cassandra. She looked radiant in her lace gown, but her mouth was tight. Her fingers dug ever so slightly into his forearm. "Do you know them?" she whispered through clenched teeth. He didn't answer right away. He needed a beat to adjust, to recalibrate. "They weren't on the guest list," she pressed. "Why is she here?" Vincent leaned closer, his voice lowered to a conspiratorial hush. "She's trying to rattle me. Don't let her win." "Who are the children?" Cassandra asked, not blinking. "I don't know," he said flatly, eyes locked on the officiant. "Probably borrowed. She's always been dramatic." Cassandra's jaw twitched. "Vincent, she wants attention. That's all this is." He turned toward her and gave a smile polished enough for a magazine cover. "She knows it's our day and she wants to poison it." The officiant asked them to exchange vows. Cassandra hesitated. She blinked too long, like her brain was struggling to refocus, but she eventually stepped forward. Vincent slid the ring onto her finger with steady hands, speaking words he barely heard. Each vowel felt foreign. The wind carried in Alara's perfume, lavender and clean soap. It used to linger in the hallway long after she'd walked past. For a second, he was back in that apartment, hearing her hum over the sound of dishwater, barefoot, pregnant, unaware. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Applause broke out, but not from the back row. Alara remained seated. She clapped once, slow and polite. The children followed her lead. It was eerie, almost theatrical. Cassandra squeezed Vincent's hand as they turned to face the guests, but her grip had changed. Less romantic, more like a warning. "Smile," Vincent murmured. "Don't lie to me," she replied, through a perfect grin. Photographers snapped pictures, but Vincent could feel the crack widening beneath his polished exterior. He kept his posture tall. He shook hands. He kissed cheeks. At the edge of the reception lawn, he finally caught a moment alone and slipped behind a row of tall hedges. He exhaled hard, pulled out his phone and stared at it. No messages, no missed calls. He considered texting someone. Peter? No, he'd asked too many questions. He deleted the thought, then glanced back toward the main lawn. The triplets were standing now, quietly walking among the guests. Not running, not laughing, just walking. One of the boys held a folded napkin like a note. The girl had her eyes fixed on the stage. Vincent's pulse ticked faster. He stepped forward to intercept them but stopped when he caught sight of Cassandra, watching him from across the lawn, her smile gone. She saw him. She saw them. And what she saw didn't add up. Vincent smoothed his jacket and walked back into the crowd. Behind him, the little boy opened the napkin and held it out to a stranger. Inside, a sketch of Vincent, red ink dripping from his eyes. The reception flowed on with practiced elegance. Champagne towers, violinists, laughter rising and falling in carefully measured waves. But beneath the surface, tension spread like spilled wine on white linen. Vincent kept looking for the children. They'd vanished into the crowd, then reappeared in odd places, near the catering tent behind the stage, standing quietly by the koi pond. Never speaking, always watching. But now one was missing. The girl. She'd been there one moment, then gone the next. Vincent scanned the field, ignoring small talk and handshakes. Ilara remained seated under the shade of a large oak, sipping from a flute of water. She didn't appear concerned. In fact, she looked patient. Below the main estate, a staff member named Nora was restocking wine crates in the cool cellar when she heard faint footsteps. She turned, expecting another waiter. Instead, the girl in the yellow raincoat stood in the doorway, even though it hadn't rained in days. Her dark curls were half tucked into the oversized hood, her hands behind her back. "You're not supposed to be down here, sweetie," Nora said gently, setting down the wine bottle. "Where's your mom?" The girl didn't answer. She took a few steps forward, then slowly held out a folded piece of thick off-white paper. Nora hesitated, then took it. It was a drawing. Crude but haunting. Vincent, unmistakably him, with red streaks pouring from his eyes and mouth. His suit was carefully detailed. His tie perfect, but his hands were shackled. "What's this?" Nora asked, unnerved. The girl said nothing. Upstairs, Cassandra's father, retired state prosecutor Gerald Wynne, mingled near the dessert bar. He was a man of quiet calculation, built on 30 years of courtroom instincts. When Nora approached and asked, "Is this important?" he read her tone before he saw the paper. He unfolded the drawing slowly. His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. He glanced around the lawn, spotted Vincent laughing too loudly with an investor, and narrowed his gaze. "Where'd this come from?" he asked the little girl. "She's one of the triplets," Nora said, then paused. She was in the wine cellar, alone. He folded the paper back up and tucked it into his blazer pocket. Later, during a toast, Gerald pulled Cassandra aside. "Do you know where those children came from?" he asked. "They're Vincent's ex-wives," she replied stiffly. "Why?" "Because that little girl just handed me a drawing of Vincent in chains with blood pouring from his face." Cassandra blinked. "What?" Gerald nodded. "I've seen hundreds of threats in my career. That wasn't a child's imagination." Her voice dropped. "You think it's a warning? I think someone here knows something you don't." He glanced back toward Ilara, who was now watching them. Not smug, not angry, composed. Cassandra's chest tightened. She walked back toward Vincent, who was now giving a second speech by the fountain. The guests clapped, but she didn't hear his words. Her eyes moved across the crowd, searching. Ilara met her gaze. And for a moment the two women simply stared. Behind them, the girl in the yellow raincoat had returned to the cellar door. She pulled out another drawing from her coat pocket and taped it to the wall. It showed the same image. Vincent, bleeding, but now with 3 small figures holding hands behind him, one of them holding a key, and in the corner of the page, scrawled in red crayon, "Ask him why we don't have a last name." The reception began to thin as the sky shifted into a cooler blue. Guests lingered with half-empty flutes, their laughter slower now, conversations curling into quieter corners. In the far west courtyard, away from the music and speeches, Ilara stood beside a stone water fountain, the triplets nearby playing with flower petals. A man approached her cautiously, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. "Thought you could use something cold," he said. Offering her one, she took it, nodded politely. "Thanks, Sam Kessler," he said. "Local, I run a podcast, The Dark Beneath. Usually small-town crime stories, political cover-ups, that sort of thing." Ilara gave a soft smile. "Sounds heavy." "Only when it's true," he replied. "And today feels like something true is hiding behind something expensive." She sipped, watching her children toss petals into the fountain. "I won't push," Sam said. "But if you ever want to talk off the record." Her eyes didn't leave the water. "Have you ever looked into sealed court cases?" "All the time," he said. "Judges hate me." "Then you'd know how fast names can disappear," she said softly. "How sometimes you leave a courtroom thinking it's over, but the real verdict gets signed in a back room." Sam watched her more carefully now. "What are we talking about?" "Custody." "A disappearance," she replied. "Of rights. Of recognition." "You're saying the father had your custody sealed?" Ilara gave a ghost of a smile. I'm saying the man who once promised me forever bribed a court clerk to erase a signature before it ever hit a ledger. Sam's eyes narrowed. That's a big claim. It's not a claim, she said. It's a memory. He pulled out his phone, voice low. Was there a name? A judge? Judge Lauren Keats, she whispered. Fifth Circuit. Disbarred 2 years later. Went missing 6 months after that. They called it a boating accident. Sam stared at her. I've heard that name. Keats handled a lot of sealed family court cases. Most of them just vanished off public record. Alara placed her glass on the stone rim. You're a podcaster. You dig in dirt? Go ahead. Dig. That night, back in his rental car parked on a gravel turnoff, Sam opened his laptop and started digging. First search, Judge Lauren Keats, listed as missing, presumed dead, no body recovered. Second, Vincent LeClaire, past court filings. Nothing recent, nothing at all. Then he went deeper, pulling archived PDFs from third-party databases, old redacted transcripts. A mention in an unrelated lawsuit caught his eye. Petitioner previously involved in sealed family court matter ref. Case number 27 CB 4328. That case number didn't exist anymore. He tried a parallel search. Keats, Alara, custody. A 2017 clerk memo from a now-retired assistant listed a visitation scheduling request, marked voided by judge's order. Sam's breath caught. He knew the pattern. Voided custody requests, disappearing files. A specific judge, a specific year. He made a quick call to a contact at a legal podcast network. Get me anything you can find on a custody case sealed in 2017. Plaintiff, Ilara James. Defendant, Vincent LeClaire. Search by clerk notes, not names. An hour later, a document came through, a digitized docket, corrupted but partially readable. It listed a settlement. No signatures. No court stamp. Just a note at the bottom. Custody relinquished in verbal chambers discussion. No written transcript filed. That wasn't just unethical. It was criminal. Sam leaned back in his seat, heart racing. He looked at the wedding flyer folded beside him. Tomorrow's headlines could ruin a millionaire or vindicate a mother. As he shut the laptop, a notification popped up. Someone had sent a private tip to his podcast email. Subject line: Ask Vincent who paid the judge. The envelope wasn't empty, and attached was a grainy image marked a man in a navy suit handing off an envelope in a courthouse parking lot. The man was Vincent, and the date stamp was 7 years ago. Sam looked up at the vineyard lights blinking in the distance, then down at the photo again. The envelope was thick, very thick, and the hand that received it belonged to Judge Lauren Keats. The music pulsed softly through the speakers, but the mood had shifted. Laughter came in shorter bursts. Guests moved more cautiously, their eyes occasionally flicking toward Ilara's table, toward the triplets who looked too calm, too rehearsed for children their age. Inside the estate's lounge, Cassandra stood alone by the glass bar, her reflection warped in the mirror behind the bottles. She'd excused herself from Vincent 20 minutes ago, claiming she needed to fix her makeup. In truth, she needed to breathe. Her father had just handed her the drawing from the little girl. Vincent's bleeding face, shackles. And now the podcaster, Sam, had approached her, phone in hand, his voice urgent. You need to see something. He pressed play. The footage was grainy, time-stamped from 7 years ago. A hotel security camera angled at a side entrance. Vincent, unmistakably younger but still in his tailored confidence, walked up to the door. Beside him, a woman in a scarlet trench coat, sunglasses, and red heels. She carried a baby carrier in each hand. Another woman followed behind with a third. No one stopped them. Cassandra blinked at the screen. Who is she? According to Ilara, Sam said, that woman took her newborns the night Vincent left. She thought they were being taken to a hospital for care. She never saw them again. Cassandra's breath stilled. Sam added, I cross-checked the hotel records. That room was paid for with a wire transfer from an account registered to one of Vincent's shell companies. The same account that made monthly payments to a private caregiver for 3 years, until it was abruptly closed. No, she whispered, even as her brain began rearranging years of red flags. Sam handed her a printed still from the video. This isn't just about an ex-wife. This is about stolen children. Cassandra didn't respond. She turned and walked out of the lounge, the paper gripped tight in her hand. Outside, Vincent was posing for a photo, champagne raised, smile blinding. She waited until the shutter clicked. Then she stepped forward and handed him the photo. His smile vanished mid-laugh. He looked down. The image hit like ice water. "You were supposed to burn this," he muttered. Her voice didn't rise. "Who is she?" "Cass, this isn't... Who is she?" She repeated louder now. Guess turned. Ilara didn't. She was already watching. Vincent swallowed hard. "It's not what you think." "That's your favorite line," Cassandra said. "Tell me, did she help you fake the paperwork too?" His jaw tightened. "This is our wedding, not the place. Then you shouldn't have lied about where your children went." He glanced around, eyes twitching at the stairs. "I gave them a better life than she ever could. You stole them." "She was unstable," he hissed. "I protected them from her. You don't know the full story." "No," Cassandra said, stepping back. "I don't. Because the man I married built his empire on erasure." Vincent tried to reach for her hand. "Cass, don't." But she was already walking away, tears blurring in her lashes. Across the lawn, the triplets stood together, facing the stage. The girl clutched a napkin covered in red crayon. The drawing was fresh. Sam approached Ilara again, holding up a second document. "The wire transfer matches the company Vincent used to lease this estate." Ilara simply nodded. "He's unraveling," Sam added. "He always was," she said softly. "He just had a better tailor back then." From the far edge of the lawn, Gerald, Cassandra's father, took out his phone and dialed a quiet number. "I need you to reopen a case," he said. "Now." Back at the bar, Vincent stared at the photograph in his hand, unable to look away. Because behind the woman in red, just barely visible in the frame, was a figure he hadn't noticed before. A man in a judge's robe, watching it all. The vineyard had fallen quiet. The last of the guests were gone. The fairy lights dimmed to a warm hum above the trellised walkway. Only the low buzz of crickets filled the silence between the vines. It was past midnight when Vincent found her. Ilara stood alone in the moonlit garden near the stone fountain, her gown catching the light like liquid ink. The triplets were asleep inside. Cassandra had insisted they rest in the estate's guest suite. Ilara had agreed without protest. She was waiting for this moment. Vincent stepped out from the shadows. She didn't turn. "Was this your plan?" he asked coldly. "Some kind of show? Embarrass me in front of everyone I built this for?" She exhaled slowly. "No, this was your show, Vincent. I just made sure you had a mirror." He moved closer. "They don't belong here." "They do," she said, finally turning to face him. "More than you think. I'm not playing this game," he snapped. "Take your kids and go. Before morning." "You still call them my kids?" she said, eyes sharp. "Even now?" He clenched his fists. "This is about you, Ilara, always has been. Your bitterness. Your need for drama. You could have stayed quiet." "I did," she said. "For years. I stayed quiet while you rewrote history, while you bought silence, while you told the world I didn't matter." He stepped forward. "You want money? A settlement? I'll write a check so fat your grandkids won't have to work." Her eyes didn't move. "They already have something better. They have truth." Vincent's voice lowered, dangerous now. "Do you think they'll thank you? Growing up in my shadow? Knowing who I am and what I built?" "They won't grow up in your shadow," she said. "Because I made sure they'd never need your light." He laughed bitterly. "You really think they're better off? Look around. You came here in a rented limo wearing borrowed pearls." Ilara stepped closer, her voice calm. The pearls were real, and the limo was paid in full. Vincent's jaw tightened. She continued, "But this, your estate, your investors, your entire empire, it's hollow. You crafted a kingdom on secrecy, thinking power would erase guilt. But those kids? They're not just your children. They're your reflection." He stared at her, frozen. "They carry your ambition," she said softly, "your charm. But they also carry your cruelty, your pride. Everything you tried to destroy in me, they inherited. And unlike you, they'll learn what to do with it." The wind stirred the leaves between them. "You don't get to walk away clean, Vincent. Not this time." He stepped back, suddenly unsure. "What are you going to do?" She tilted her head. "I'm not the one who has to act anymore." From the path behind the hedge, faint footsteps approached. Gerald's voice echoed faintly. He's still out here. With her. Vincent looked over his shoulder, pulse rising. Alara said nothing more. She walked past him, heels clicking softly on the stone path. As she reached the gate, she glanced back once. You built a kingdom of glass, she said. And tonight everyone saw the cracks. She disappeared into the shadows. A flashlight beam swept across the hedge as Gerald and two men in dark suits stepped into view. Vincent didn't move. Because for the first time in years, he didn't know which version of himself to wear. The morning light bled gold across the vineyard, soft and deceptive. The estate had been reset for the second ceremony, Vincent's attempt at salvaging what was left. The guests returned, some out of obligation, others for the drama. The tabloids were already circling. Cassandra stood on the balcony of her suite overlooking the lawn. Her wedding gown was still on the hanger. She hadn't put it back on. Vincent hadn't seen her since the night before. Downstairs, the podium was decorated again. The violinist rehearsed softly. A new arch of imported roses framed the altar. Everything had been repolished, reprogrammed, as if the truth hadn't already fractured the glass. Gerald stood by the reflecting pool, flipping through a folder. Sam Kessler, the podcaster, handed him a flash drive. It's all here, Sam said. Wire transfers, surveillance stills, 2 clerk depositions, and the flight logs. He used a private plane 2 weeks after the custody ruling, one that never showed on public record. Gerald's jaw flexed. You've done good work. Thank Alara, Sam replied. She never wanted vengeance, just truth. Gerald nodded once and made the call. On the altar, Vincent adjusted his cufflinks, checking his reflection in a silver wine bucket. The mask was back, suave, composed, familiar. The morning breeze tugged gently at the tails of his tuxedo jacket. He saw the guests taking their seats. Whispers buzzed low. Cassandra was still missing. But he wasn't worried. He had a speech prepared this time. Then he saw the first black SUV pull in. No logo. No sirens, just authority and silence. Then a second. Vincent's spine stiffened. Gerald stepped onto the stage before him, folder still in hand. The crowd quieted. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, before this ceremony proceeds, I'd like to introduce a few guests of my own. 2 officers in plain clothes walked down the aisle, badges out. One of them looked Vincent in the eye. Vincent Leclerc? Vincent's hands dropped from his jacket. You're under arrest for falsifying court records, bribing a public official, and interfering with a federal custody order. Gasps rippled through the crowd. What the hell is this? Vincent barked, trying to keep his composure. This is a wedding. You'll have time to talk, the officer said, stepping closer. But right now you're coming with us. Handcuffs clicked behind his back. No, wait, this is insane. Cameras were already snapping. Someone live-streamed from a phone. Cassandra stood at the edge of the courtyard now. No dress, just a pale blue robe, arms crossed. She didn't look shocked. She looked free. Alara remained seated near the fountain, her children beside her. The little girl had a daisy in her hand. One of the boys leaned against her arm. The third watched everything, face unreadable. As Vincent was led down the aisle, he caught Alara's gaze. She didn't flinch. You did this, he hissed through clenched teeth. No, she said, almost tender. You did. The crowd parted as the officers walked him past the guests, each step heavier than the last. Sam watched silently. Gerald stood tall, hands folded. Cassandra never looked away. The cuffs glinted in the morning sun. Behind them, the violinist had stopped playing. In the quiet, one of the children whispered to Alara, Is it over? She ran a hand through his hair. Not yet, she said. But soon. And as the SUV doors closed around Vincent's stunned face, a waiter delivered a microphone to the fountain, where Alara now stood up. Lifting her glass, if this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. The vineyard was frozen in a kind of collective silence. Guests remained in their seats, some holding their champagne flutes midair, unsure whether to sip or simply leave. Others whispered behind manicured hands, their eyes darting between the altar, now vacant, and the woman walking calmly toward the microphone. Alara. She moved with quiet certainty, each step slow but unshaken. The triplets walked beside her, hand in hand, their formal shoes softly brushing the stone path. Behind them, the estate staff stood silently at the edges, uncertain if they were witnessing the end of a wedding or the beginning of something else. The officers' SUVs were gone now. Vincent, too. Cassandra sat near the front row, veil gone, mascara smudged. Her face was pale but not broken. She didn't cry loudly, just sat still like a porcelain figure that had cracked down the center, beautiful but no longer whole. Ilara reached the podium, her fingers curled once around the microphone, steady as ever. She looked out over the vineyard, past the rows of white chairs, past the stage. Her children stood behind her, the girl holding a small daisy she'd picked from a nearby planter. Ilara lifted her glass. "I won't take much of your time," she began, her voice clear and without tremble. "After all, I wasn't invited to speak. I was barely invited to exist." Some in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. "But since we're all here," she continued, "and since the champagne is still cold, let's raise a glass, not to Vincent, not to his empire or his ceremony or his carefully curated version of events." She paused, letting the words land. Let's raise a glass to the thing he never understood. She turned slightly, looking at her children. To survival. A ripple moved through the crowd. A few glasses lifted. Hesitantly, Ilara's eyes swept across them. "He thought I'd come here in shame," she said. "He thought I'd be silent, small, trembling at the sight of his power. But I didn't come here to disrupt a wedding. I came here to reclaim a story." The little girl tugged gently at her skirt. Ilara touched her shoulder. "5 years ago, I was left in a motel bathroom bleeding and afraid. I carried 3 lives inside me and I thought I'd lost everything. But what I lost wasn't mine to keep. It was his illusion." She turned back to the crowd. "What I kept is standing behind me." Gasps were audible now. Some people wept. Others nodded slowly, reverently. "I've been many things," she said. "A wife, a waitress, a ghost in court records, a name erased. But today I am something far more dangerous." She smiled gently. "I am unafraid." More guests lifted their glasses now. "I didn't come for revenge. I came so that you'd see what he tried to bury, and so my children would know. Their mother didn't vanish." She raised her glass higher. "To new beginnings." The cheer started small, then grew, a few claps, then more, until the vineyard echoed with it. Not the polite applause of a wedding, but the raw, rising sound of recognition. Of people who had watched a man fall and a woman rise in the same breath. Ilara stepped back from the mic. The triplets clapped too, smiling up at her. At the edge of the lawn, Cassandra stood. She walked toward Ilara slowly, heels forgotten in the grass. When she reached her, she didn't speak. She just opened her arms. And to everyone's surprise, Ilara stepped into them. The 2 women stood there, holding each other, one a bride without a groom, the other a mother without apology. Then Cassandra whispered, "You won." Ilara shook her head softly. "No, they did." From behind them, Sam lifted his camera, capturing the moment, not for clicks or downloads, but for truth. Because this wasn't the ending. It was the record, and this time it would not disappear.